Welcome back to Think and Speak podcast. Today's episode is special because we're not talking about vocabulary lists or grammar drills. We're talking about the one mental skill that separates people who know English from people who live English. Daniel, let me ask you, why do so many learners study for years but still freeze when they speak?
Because they're training their memory, not their mind. And today, we're going to fix that.
Exactly.
If you've ever said, I understand English, but I can't speak it, this episode is for you. We're going to uncover how fluent speakers think, not just how they talk.
And by the end of this episode, you'll hear English differently. You'll process it faster. You'll respond more naturally. This is the kind of lesson people wish they'd learned years ago.
Before we begin, do us a favor. Like this video if you're serious about improving your English, and comment below. What's the biggest problem you face when speaking?
Your comment might shape our next episode. Let's get started.
Daniel, many English learners spend years studying grammar books, memorizing vocabulary lists, and watching English videos every day, yet when they try to speak, their minds suddenly go blank. They hesitate, translate in their heads, or feel that their sentences sound unnatural. This frustrates them deeply because they know they've invested time and effort. From your experience as a language mentor, why does this happen so often? More importantly, what is the real mental difference between someone who knows English academically and someone who speaks it fluently in real life? I'd like you to explain not just what fluency looks like on the surface, but what is happening internally in the brain. What mental habit separates fluent speakers from learners who are stuck at an intermediate level? And why do traditional study methods fail to develop this skill, even when learners understand grammar rules very well? Please help our listeners understand what they've been missing all this time, and why fluency is not just about knowing more English, but about thinking differently in English.
This happens because most learners are training the wrong mental system. They are developing explicit knowledge of English, but fluency depends on implicit processing. In simple terms, they know about English, but they haven't trained their brain to use English automatically. The real mental difference lies in how language is retrieved. Non-fluent speakers construct sentences consciously. They think about vocabulary, grammar rules, word order, and correctness at the same time. This creates cognitive overload. Fluent speakers, on the other hand, retrieve language as ready-made patterns, also known as lexical chunks. For example, an academic learner might think, past tense, irregular verb, go, went, yesterday goes at the end. A fluent speaker simply says, I went there yesterday. The grammar is still there, but it's operating subconsciously. This is called procedural grammar, as opposed to declarative grammar. Declarative grammar is knowing rules, like, use the present perfect for life experiences. Procedural grammar is saying, I've never seen that movie, without thinking about tense names at all. Traditional study methods fail because they overemphasize analysis. Analysis is useful at the beginning, but fluency requires automation through repetition in context. The brain becomes fluent by recognizing patterns repeatedly in meaningful situations. Another key concept is meaning-first processing. Fluent speakers don't think in words, they think in intentions and meanings. The sentence appears as a result of the intention. Learners often reverse this process. They search for words first, then try to build meaning. For instance, instead of thinking, how do I say this politely? They think, what is the polite sentence structure? That delay kills fluency. Fluency, therefore, is a mental habit. It's the habit of trusting familiar patterns, tolerating imperfection, and prioritizing communication over correctness. Until learners retrain their brain to operate this way, no amount of vocabulary or grammar will make them sound fluent.
That's a powerful distinction, Daniel. But many listeners might say, I understand everything when I listen or read in English, but when I open my mouth, I can't express myself. This seems confusing to learners because they feel their English level is high, yet their speaking ability doesn't reflect that level at all. Why is understanding English so much easier than speaking it? What mental processes are involved in listening versus speaking, and why doesn't strong comprehension automatically lead to fluent speech? Also, how does fear of making mistakes interact with this mental gap? I'd like you to explain why this problem is so common worldwide and what learners misunderstand about the relationship between input and output. Most importantly, what kind of training does the brain actually need to convert passive understanding into active, confident speaking?
This problem exists because understanding and speaking use different cognitive mechanisms. Listening and reading rely on recognition, while speaking relies on retrieval and production. Recognition is passive, production is active. The brain finds recognition much easier. When you listen, your brain only needs to identify familiar sounds and match them with meaning. When you speak, your brain must select vocabulary, apply grammar, organize word order, pronounce sounds clearly, and monitor meaning, all in real time. This creates a heavy working memory load. This explains why learners often say, "I know this sentence, but I can't say it." They recognize it when they hear it, but they haven't practiced retrieving it independently. Linguistically, this is the gap between receptive skills and productive skills. Fear makes this gap worse. When learners worry about mistakes, their attention shifts from meaning to self-monitoring. They think, "Is this correct?" instead of, "What do I want to say?" This activates the brain's stress response, which further reduces fluency. Consider this example. Correct but slow. I was thinking that maybe. Natural and fluent. I was thinking maybe. The difference is not intelligence, it's familiarity with the structure. Learners often misunderstand input. They believe that listening alone will magically turn into speaking ability. Input is necessary, but it must be activated. The brain needs repeated opportunities to pull language out, not just see it. Effective training includes answering questions aloud, paraphrasing what you hear, using sentence frames like, "What I mean is," or, "From my point of view." From a grammar perspective, focusing on high-frequency structures is critical. Structures like past simple, present perfect, modal verbs, and conditionals appear constantly in real speech. Mastery of these patterns leads to confidence. Speaking fluency emerges when production becomes familiar. The brain doesn't become fluent by observing, it becomes fluent by doing.
Another struggle many learners mention is translation. They feel trapped between their native language and English, constantly translating ideas before speaking. This often makes their speech slow, unnatural, and sometimes grammatically incorrect. Daniel, why is translation such a serious obstacle to fluency? What exactly happens in the brain when a learner translates instead of thinking directly in English? Could you explain how translation affects sentence structure, word choice, and natural expression? Also, is translation always bad, or does it have a limited role in learning? Finally, what practical mental strategies can learners use to reduce translation and start forming direct connections between meaning and English expressions?
Translation is a serious obstacle because it forces the brain to operate in two linguistic systems simultaneously. This doubles processing time and increases the chance of errors. Instead of expressing meaning, the learner negotiates between languages. Languages are not mathematical equivalents. Each language organizes reality differently. When learners translate, they often create negative transfer, where native language structures interfere with English grammar. For example, incorrect, "She explained me the problem." Correct, "She explained the problem to me." The learner translated a structure that works in many languages but not in English. This is called syntactic interference. Translation also explains unnatural phrasing. Learners might say, "I feel myself tired," instead of "I feel tired." The reflexive structure exists in other languages but not in English. Is translation always bad? No. Translation is useful at beginner levels to build basic meaning. But beyond that stage, it becomes a crutch. Fluency requires direct form-meaning mapping. Fluent speakers don't translate words like awkward, actually, or kind of. These words carry pragmatic meaning, not direct equivalence. To reduce translation, learners should learn phrases, not isolated words. Visualize situations instead of sentences. Use English for internal dialogue. For example, "I need to reply to this email. This conversation is getting interesting." Grammar improves naturally when learners internalize patterns such as, I'm used to plus noun/gerund. It turns out that when meaning connects directly to English structure, fluency accelerates. The goal is not to abandon your native language, but to stop letting it stand between you and expression.
Daniel, grammar is one of the most controversial topics in language learning. Some learners believe grammar is everything, while others think grammar doesn't matter at all and that speaking freely is enough. This creates confusion, especially for learners who want to sound natural but are afraid of making mistakes. From a mental and linguistic perspective, what role does grammar actually play in fluent English? How should learners think about grammar so that it supports fluency instead of blocking it? Also, why do many learners know grammar rules very well but still struggle to use them correctly when speaking? I'd like you to explain the difference between learning grammar as information and acquiring grammar as a skill. Finally, how can learners practice grammar in a way that feels natural, modern, and connected to real communication rather than classroom exercises?
Grammar is essential, but not in the way most learners think. Grammar is not the engine of fluency, it is the operating system. It runs quietly in the background when used correctly, but it causes problems when learners try to control it consciously while speaking. The biggest mistake learners make is treating grammar as theory instead of behavior. They memorize rules such as, use the present perfect for unfinished time, but fluency requires recognizing patterns like, I've been working on this all morning. I've already sent the email. These are not rules, they are usage patterns. The reason learners freeze is because grammar knowledge is stored as declarative knowledge, facts about language. Fluent speakers rely on procedural knowledge, which is automatic and unconscious. You don't think, subject plus auxiliary plus past participle. You simply say, I've never tried it. This explains why learners perform well on grammar tests but struggle in conversations. Tests reward analysis. Conversations reward speed and predictability. Grammar acquisition works best through high-frequency exposure and guided repetition. For example, instead of studying all modal verbs, learners should master patterns like, you might want to, you're supposed to, you don't have to. These phrases embed grammar, meaning, and pragmatics at the same time. Another key point is tolerance of ambiguity. Fluent speakers allow imperfect grammar to pass if meaning is clear. Overcorrecting yourself mid-sentence disrupts fluency far more than a small mistake. Modern grammar learning should focus on chunk-based learning, spoken examples, not written rules, real contexts such as meetings, phone calls, and casual conversations. Grammar supports fluency when it is learned as how people speak, not how sentences are labeled. When grammar becomes familiar, it disappears, and that's when fluency begins.
Daniel, confidence seems to be one of the biggest invisible barriers to fluent English. Many learners have enough vocabulary and grammar, yet they hesitate, speak quietly, or avoid conversations altogether. This often leads them to believe that confidence is a personality trait, something you either have or don't have. From your perspective, is confidence in English psychological, linguistic, or both? How does fear of mistakes affect the brain's ability to speak fluently? And why do even advanced learners sometimes lose confidence in real conversations, especially with native speakers? I'd also like you to explain how confident speakers mentally handle mistakes differently from non-confident speakers. Finally, what practical mindset shifts can help learners build real speaking confidence that lasts, not temporary motivation?
Confidence in English is not personality-based, it is experience-based. It comes from familiarity, not courage. The brain feels confident when it recognizes patterns it has used before. Fear of mistakes activates self-monitoring, which pulls attention away from meaning. Instead of thinking, what do I want to say? Learners think, is this sentence correct? This slows down processing and causes hesitation. Fluent speakers handle mistakes differently because they see them as adjustments, not failures. For example, sorry, I meant to say last week. This kind of self-correction is natural and common among native speakers. Linguistically, confidence grows when learners master repair strategies, such as, let me rephrase that. What I'm trying to say is, I might be wrong, but... These phrases give control and time. Advanced learners often lose confidence because expectations increase. They believe their English should be perfect. This creates pressure and reduces spontaneity. Mindset shifts that build confidence include replacing perfection with clarity, viewing mistakes as feedback, measuring success by communication, not correctness. From a grammar perspective, confidence improves when learners focus on simple, accurate structures instead of complex ones. Clear sentences are more effective than sophisticated but broken ones. Confidence grows through repeated exposure to speaking situations. The brain learns safety through repetition. Over time, English stops feeling risky and starts feeling normal.
Daniel, many listeners want practical guidance. They ask, what should I do every day to become fluent? Unfortunately, they often receive vague advice like, practice more or immerse yourself. Could you break this down more clearly? What daily habits actually train the mental skill behind fluent English? How much time is truly necessary, and what kind of practice produces the fastest results? Also, how can learners practice speaking effectively if they don't live in an English-speaking country or don't have access to native speakers? Finally, what common daily habits should learners avoid because they give the illusion of progress but don't improve real fluency?
Fluency is built through short, consistent speaking habits, not long study sessions. 10 focused minutes of speaking every day is more effective than hours of passive input. The most powerful habit is daily microspeaking. This includes describing what you're doing, summarizing your day aloud, answering open-ended questions. Sentence starters help structure thought. Today I realized that. One thing that stood out was. These frames recycle grammar such as past tense, relative clauses, and discourse markers. Learners do not need native speakers. Speaking to yourself, recording voice notes, or shadowing spoken English activates the same production mechanisms. Effective habits train retrieval, not recognition. Watching videos feels productive, but without speaking, fluency doesn't improve. Habits to avoid. Memorizing word lists without context. Studying rare grammar forms. Relying only on subtitles. Grammar improves when learners repeatedly use high-utility structures, such as I tend to. It depends on. I'm not used to. Fluency is not built in silence. The brain needs repetition of output. Small daily habits compound into automatic speech.
Daniel, as we conclude today's episode, I'd like you to speak directly to our listeners. Many of them have tried and failed before. They feel stuck, frustrated, or even embarrassed about their English. Based on everything we've discussed, the mental skill behind fluency, grammar, confidence, and daily habits, what is the single most important idea they should remember? If they forget all techniques and methods, what mindset should they carry forward? And how can they tell that they are finally moving in the right direction, even if their English is not perfect yet?
The most important idea is this: fluency is not a level, it is a habit. If learners wait to feel ready, they will never speak freely. Fluency grows while speaking imperfectly. Progress is not measured by fewer mistakes, but by less hesitation and more flow. The right mindset is to treat English as a tool, not a test. Communication comes first. Accuracy improves later. Signs of real progress include thinking in English without effort, responding faster, using familiar phrases naturally. Grammar becomes smoother, not because rules are remembered, but because patterns are repeated. Fluent speakers are not better learners, they are more active users. If listeners remember one thing, it should be this: English becomes fluent when you stop trying to speak perfectly and start speaking consistently. That is the secret mental skill behind fluent English.